I think the stats here give a little bit of a insight into the scale of the company. We have a service booked on Rover once every 3 seconds worldwide. So that's someone, booking a overnight dog boarding or a dog walk or, a drop in for their cat every 3 seconds around the world. We're currently available in 8 different languages and in 10 countries. So, I got a little ahead of myself there.
No,
um,
this is perfect.
so yeah, that's a little intro into the scale of the organization as it is right now. And we were previously in Europe, Dog Buddy, which was the European competitor to Rover. And Rover acquired Dog Buddy back in 2018, and we merged into the Rover brand and kind of took on the European landscape as well. So that was a really exciting time.
I bet. I'm curious to hear from our audience if anyone has used Rover before. Just maybe throw a yes into the chat if you've used it before. And we've already got a big yes from Carrie. Great to see you here, Carrie. But it is a remarkable product. And just looking at the screenshot here of your homepage, it's what's interesting about this to me is that this is not just a marketing website that you have here. Like this is a full-on product and booking engine so that consumers can book services, which introduces a lot of different complications. And I wanted to share a little bit about the different types of content that you all are producing and delivering out to the marketplace. Can you tell us a little bit more about all of these different content types?
Oh man, I'll have to try to summarize, but there's a lot here. So I think the majority of our content is probably from our website and our apps, our mobile apps for iOS and Android. We do then have content around, our legal, so our terms of service and our privacy policy, which isn't, the funnest stuff to translate, but, needs to get done. And then all of our communications and marketing. So that's, our emails, our blog, our SEM and, PPC or pay-per-click ads we have. All of our social media as well. We made some pretty big decisions around the time of the migration on whether or not to roll all of our social media brands into one kind of global brand or to keep them more local and in the same language. So the decision was to keep them separate, at least for the time being, to keep the audiences and do a little bit more analysis on that side. And then there's ongoing updates to our FAQs, our help center content, and the product all the time as well. So it's a lot to manage, but the team does an awesome job.
Yeah. And how often are you guys pushing out new versions of the apps?
Oh, Mark will have to keep me honest on this one. I think, what do we want to say, monthly?
Yeah, sometimes more often than that. It just depends on if we have any new features that we want to release.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Jordanna, you mentioned earlier that you previously were working with Dog Buddy, the European competitor to Rover. What was the situation back in 2018 when you all were in a bit of a competitive position with Rover?
I wouldn't say, well, yeah, I wouldn't say competitive per se, because we had different markets, but I think there was definitely a decision there, a strategic decision to acquire rather than try to compete in the industry. And we were acquired by Rover in October 2018. Which was a super exciting time for all of us. The Dog Buddy team was, I believe, around 50 people at the time. and Rover, more than I think 5x that. So we had all these new colleagues to meet. But the big challenge was that we needed to figure out how to get these two brands into one, and how to get all the users over to the other platform in a pretty fast at a pretty fast pace. So um, the team that we made was kind of a task force that was put together to take on the migration aspect of it, while the rest of the company could still run. And that was kind of where all this fun localization projects came into play.
Well, at the time, there were a lot of advantages, so to speak, that Dog Buddy had in terms of localization and translation, because you were operating in Europe and you had to build your company from the ground up as one that would be facing multiple audiences in the region. So what was the status of Dog Buddy's localization and translation efforts?
Yeah, Dog Buddy was available in 8 European markets at the time, and 8 languages. But we didn't have nearly the scale that Rover had. So we didn't focus on localization as its own independent business unit, because we were so small. You could really just go and talk to people, and the amount of content that was coming through was pretty small on a regular basis. Um, so when we had to try to figure out at Rover how much content is there, and what are the different channels where all the content is located. It was a huge undertaking, that I think no one in the entire organization had any idea, the scale of it. So it was a really fun project to do, and kind of daunting, but we got through it.
Well, it is interesting because when we were talking about that acquisition, um, it was great to be coming together with an organization that had the scale that Rover had. But you learned very quickly about some challenges that the coming together of these two brands would have when you were bringing the Rover brand to market. And these three, translation, internationalization, and having a European presence, are three areas where Rover was really looking to change their market position.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it felt like there were about a million different decisions that needed to be made every single day. And you wanted to make the right decision because there was down, a downriver effect of everything that you made, every decision that you made. But you just needed to kind of make a decision at some points and move on. The amount of content that we had coming in had a lot of hard coded phone numbers or data formats, currencies, stuff like that we had to make a decision on early on. Are we going to rewrite all this code and put everything into placeholders, or are we going to keep it as is and try to figure out the placeholders later? And in the end decided, what, we're going to try to slow down so that we can speed up, and do the work up front to try to internationalize everything, which was, I think, a project that we knew would have to happen, but not at the scale. And I think we're still learning every day things that still are needing to be internationalized, or putting a placeholder here or there. This is feminine or masculine. So there's still lessons, I think, every day that we're learning.
Hmm. And I recall that when we last spoke, and the you had a meeting with your team, and the prompt was, you've got 6 months to sort of resolve the internationalization and translation challenges that Rover had when you all came together.
Yeah, we really wanted to launch ahead of the summer travel season. I love that emoji. And that was kind of our goal to get, everything launched and all of our users migrated over. And at the time when my manager asked me, hey, can you, you know, uh, head up the localization aspect, I really just, didn't think that it was going to be a big project. I was like, yeah, like, that's okay. It's going to be easy. But I was very, very wrong. Um, and we had a really great time. There were a lot of late nights working together and trying to figure out how we're going to do this within the time span, but it came together and we managed to pull it off somehow. A lot of late nights.
For sure. I'd be curious to hear if anyone else on the call, maybe let us know in the chat if you've had a pretty hard pressed deadline related to translation and localization, like big projects, and how you were set up to accomplish those projects. I know that there were a handful of priorities for your team, Jordanna. Maybe we can walk through these with both you and Mark.
Yeah, sure. Um, yeah, so I guess the first one was internationalizing our product in general. So both the mobile apps and our website. We had to, have an automated workflow to be able to do that as well. So I think maybe the first step was just getting set up with Smartling accordingly for all the different languages and all the different content, different projects and folders that we had to set up, and learning everything that was possible. We had to hire a team really, really quickly. I think we had in 2019 about 90 or 80 or 90 different people that were a part of the localization that touched the strings at some point in the process, which is
Hmm.
pretty cool to see. I had no idea that it was that number until we actually pulled all the data. I was assuming it was maybe 40 or 50 people. Um, and we also wanted to make sure that we were able to remain reactive and flexible. So that's, I think, where the searchable content came in, that we could, change things that needed to be changed really quickly, and that we were, even though we were a larger team, that we were still able to, find and replace a phone number really quickly if phones went down in a certain area, or um, you know, uh, different situations that would require us to need to be reactive, was really important as well.
Hmm. Well, let's dive deeper into this concept of, or this actual practice of internationalizing Rover. What are some of the complications that your team have, and you mentioned that you continue to have, in terms of ensuring that the app is coded in such a way that you can easily scale it for different markets, no matter where you want to go?
Yeah. I don't really know where to start on that one. There's so many lessons that we learned. Data formats were huge. So I think one of my favorite bugs that we encountered during the migration was that there needed to be a weight conversion from, pounds to kg. And there was some sort of bug where you would put in your dog's weight, and then if you refresh the page and went back, your dog's weight would just keep increasing. It would just like double, and then it would triple. And then it would so figuring out the coding behind that. A lot of the dog breeds, so dog breeds that are popular in North America that might not be popular in Europe, and vice versa. A lot of we had to kind of go through the list of, I think it was 500 dog breeds that Rover already had, and try to cross-reference to see if we were missing any of the popular European breeds. Um, we had a lot of marketing challenges as well that we needed to make decisions on. So things like SEO keywords. What are people searching to find this service? So Rover is fairly well known in North America, but the brand isn't as well known in Europe. So what are we going to key in? And I think Mark can speak to this a little bit more into our pages so that people are going to organically find us as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on this one. The SEO keywords is one of the most complicated components on the marketing side, because we have a lot of members of our team who only speak English, and we are used to search terms that users use in North America. And so when we started to expand our site, we have 5 core services, and we usually tie our keywords to words like dog boarding, dog walking, and then some that might not be as common in other countries, like doggy daycare. There are certain countries that do not have a concept for that. And we have to try to see how users are searching for those keywords. One of the other issues is when we go out and do keyword research to figure out what those terms are, the data isn't as robust in Europe as it is in the US. So it's hard to key in on what are users actually using. But it's so critical for us to understand that concept, because the way we go and translate our pages, we really need it to match those keywords, else we just don't get volume and don't actually start moving the needle for bookings and revenue into the business. So those were pretty big issues. And then the other one that I can think of on the product side is when we acquired DogBuddy, we did acquire a lot of technology and understanding of how DogBuddy had optimized their pages. But we had to go to on Rover and take this largely English site and start creating web pages that really are targeted towards certain countries. And there's a lot of technical SEO components. Jordanna alluded to some of these. How do we take one keyword that we're using in the US and then apply it to 7 different countries with different keywords or different service names for dog boarding? We don't want to code that 7 or 8 different times. We would rather just code it once, but have the ability for it to switch based off what country it is. So those are some of the things that we ran into when jumping on the SEO side.
Wow. And we're going to dive even deeper into the framework, Mark, that you and the team utilized to not only create SEO keyword terms at the launch of Rover in Europe, but we're also going to talk about how you sort of keep it up to date, because it's not a one-time job. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about that. And I think everybody who's on the call will really value that too, because we get a million questions about how do you manage translation and SEO. And it's way more than just selecting a translated word. It's a very in-depth process. So I'm super glad to have your expertise on this call. And should be noted that when Jordanna and I spoke on the Loc show, she was like, we were talking about SEO and how important it was, and she was telling me a couple of stories, and she says, we got to get Mark involved because he's really the one who's going to tell us how all of this went down. So I'm glad you're here. So Jordanna, you had mentioned that one of the priorities was introducing a fully automated translation workflow, and you work with Smartling. You selected Smartling. Can you tell us a little bit about what it meant to you to have a fully automated translation workflow and how you went about introducing Smartling to Rover and that whole process?
Yeah, I think the important part for us is that we have a team of internal, our CX agents and our ops agents that speak the language and that are on the front line with our customers day in, day out. And those are our primary resources for localization, because Rover is such a niche product and trust is so intrinsically tied to what we do. It's really important that the translations on our site and the localizations are done in a way that, you know, our brand and tone of voice come through. And that's not an easy thing to do. And that's not an easy thing to automate. So when we were integrating Smartling and deciding on how we were going to set this up, the language services team was a huge component. So we have default workflows for the internal team, and if anybody is going to be on, on holiday or is off sick, then we'll, message our account manager and switch over the workflows, and it's easy. So that's something that, I think is one of the best decisions we made in choosing Smartling, because the entire process is built to take on the varying volume of content, because we can estimate and forecast how much content there's going to be, but until it actually hits Smartling, then we're not exactly sure the word counts, and that's really, really important. So if we have even if the team is being inundated with contacts for certain things that are happening, we can always switch things over to the language services team, and those people are a part of the team as well, because an extended part of the team, because they're the ones that we're always working with, and we are able to communicate with them. So that's really great. The other thing that I think is probably important to mention is the integrations that we set up. So we utilize the Slack integration on with our product team and our engineers. So if any linguist has a question about a string or an instruction, they're able to open an issue. It will be directly sent to our Slack thread with the engineering and product teams, and it'll get answered pretty quickly. So there's a continuous feedback loop. Close out the question, submit it on time. We have a 72-hour SLA to get things translated and back to the team. So that really, really helps as well. I think those are kind of two of the main things that really, really make the automation easy for us.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, I think it's so cool. The aspect about Smartling that I find most attractive is really this ability to put all of your content into a single place to manage it, and you can use a variety of integrations. You happen to use the GitHub integration, the Zendesk connector, the WordPress connector as your primary content integrations, and then from that translation management system, you can do everything you need to manage translation, from translating the actual content with your in-house linguists or with Smartling translators when you need to. You've got all of these different workflows that allow you to automatically get content from its original state to its target state, and then back to your source repositories. And then you have ancillary integrations, like you mentioned, with Slack, so that communication with the translators and your developers or product managers is seamless.
Yeah.
No more email.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, any other integrations you guys are gonna queue up, we'll probably use those as well.
Well, stay tuned, because there are a lot coming in the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Awesome.
So we had a lot of fun pulling some numbers this past week or two to show how your software automation has enabled some scale, which you said was one of the advantages that Rover had, that DogBuddy required. And it looks like you've translated a lot of content, 650 translation jobs this year, and you have over 305,000 glossary entries as well.
Yeah. I'm hoping to get to 1,000 by end of the year, just to kind of round it off, and sounds really good. Yeah, so the number of glossary entries is always growing as well. As we release different features and services, we'll always update the team. You and I were chatting in the podcast about how to kind of insert internationalization and localization at the initial stages of product development. And whenever there's new features like different billing, we just started launching our recurring billing feature. So when there's features like that we're launching, we'll queue that up with the linguists, and start them thinking, okay, what would be the best word to use in this kind of, for this kind of feature. We'll start doing some research on, what are our competitors using, if they have that feature, what makes sense in each market. Are there any things that we need to change? And then it's all added to the glossary.
I think one thing that's worth noting here is that you've translated more than 2 translation jobs, or you've submitted more than 2 translation jobs per day so far in the year, including weekends. You might not be actually submitting them over the weekend, but the point is, you're submitting a lot of content on a regular basis to be translated. And one of the things that I also really like about Smartling is that you can submit as few as 1 words in a translation job to get it processed. But when you submit a translation job, are these jobs automated? Are you controlling them manually? How are you thinking about the submission process?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because we're moving towards having all of our content in Smartling as the end goal. And I'm actually starting to think through our non-automated process right now. So our product content's all automated through GitHub integration. So that content comes in with an automated due date of 72 hours, and all of the languages required and any instructions that the team has input. But then there's also a subset of content like legal documents or marketing, emails that are not often, but a couple of times a month we'll have things that need to get translated for other departments. And that's not an automated process. So I'm actually just working on right now what that's going to look like. And I think that, we've done a test run with our emails, which worked really well, uploading HTML and the visual context that comes through so that the linguists can flip between, the source and the target language when they're translating to see if the translation of a call to action button is going to actually break or, move on to 2 lines and mess up the UI. So from the standpoint of having to do it manually, it just requires, I think, documentation and training with the team so that, you have agreed SLAs and what that looks like, and that people are, I guess, aware of how to format a spreadsheet. So, you're not sending it via without any formatting, and then it's all of your headers are being pulled into Smartling, so you're not translating subject line 1, subject line 2 as well. So yeah, I think it's a process, and we're working on that right now. I think we have the automated process down, and now we just have to get the manual process going.
Awesome. Well, we'll obviously be there to help you along the way. Okay, Mark, over to you. Let's talk about search, because this is really big. Let's go through these kind of slowly, because I think it's important that people hear how SEO actually works. So let's start with that first question. How does SEO work?
Yeah,
what's the 101?
That's a really good question. I think the basics are a twofold strategy. One involves how external websites to your website link to you. So if the Washington Post decides to link to rover.com, they are a very authoritative website because they have a lot of links. And that means their link to us carries a lot of value. It's almost like a vote of confidence to Google that our site is authoritative, is what is typically used for the term. And then the other component, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that one. The more links you get from the more authoritative sites, the better it is for your site in terms of ranking. And there's a certain level of links that you need. But the other side is probably more applicable to this conversation, and that is there are key components of your web page, the on-site content on a page, that is critical for Google to understand what your content even is about and what terms it should rank for. And so There are specific spots on your page, your title tag, your first heading or your H1, and then the actual content in the page that you want to be optimized for a target keyword, and then potentially secondary keywords that you might also want to rank for. Those two basic concepts combined allow you to rank really well. Now it gets a lot deeper than that, but I think at the high level, you want your content to target a keyword that a lot of people are searching for, and then you want to have links to your site that are kind of a voting system to say that your content should be ranked.
Okay, so that's a very comprehensive definition of SEO. Now let's talk about global, because this is assuming, one market. What you just shared is one market. There's domain authority, and there are keywords that you're using on landing pages that are going to be embedded in the title tag, the H1, and the body content. You can't just take all of that from the United States and drop it into Italy. So how do you think about managing global SEO, and what is the complexity behind that?
Yeah, so global SEO is its own beast for sure. Some of the big things that you start to think about right off the bat is you need most of your pages that are effectively duplicates of another page to play that back to Google. So in the US, for example, for Rover, we have our rover.com homepage. But for each country, we have a country level homepage. So for the United Kingdom, for Spain, in the HTML of our rover.com homepage, we need to actually tell Google that we have a version of this page that is effectively a duplicate, but using different translations across each country and language type that we want to display content. And so to some of the earlier comments about the manual versus the automation, doing that manually would take hours. Hours. It would take months to years to do that for our site, because we have hundreds of thousands of pages. So we have to build that in on the product side. How we build our product, we need to build it so that it scales. And so we can build some fundamental pieces of code that will scale anytime we want to expand our content. That's one of the big things. The second thing is really, there's a lot that goes into what is a market. Where do we go find out what are all the cities within a different country, and what cities make sense for us to expand into? Is this a city of 50 people, a small town, or is there really volume to justify us having a page in that city? And we have to go figure out what that looks like and where we should look to get that data.
Cool. Okay, so there's a whole lot that goes into the foundation of setting up SEO on a global level. For you mentioned getting getting content into your source code on your homepage that tells Google that there are international versions with translations, to doing the research in the market. What is the process? I see I have a pretty glaring typo in the third bullet. Sorry about that. But what is the process that you took to come up with translation options for specific keywords?
Yeah, this is a really good question. It's one that is difficult, and we've come back to several times. I mentioned earlier in the call that one of the big issues here is we don't have a lot of strong data like we do in the US. When we start thinking about a translation for SEO, we really start with a process called keyword research, where we go and take a keyword. Like in the US, we would go into some of our tooling and we put in a keyword like dog boarding, and it would tell us what the search volume is and what the competition for that keyword is, as well as alternatives to that keyword that we could potentially target and their volumes. When we go and take an English keyword, first we have to figure out, all right, what is the translation of this? It's really critical for us to have partners that can say, is this right? Is this not? Because sometimes we actually find when we start that keyword research that there is an English term that ranks for that keyword. In the doggy daycare example I mentioned earlier, if there is a lack of a term there, sometimes the English term is used. And so we have to decide, is this real? Is this not? And so anyways, we start out with this kind of keyword research process of trying to tie down what is the international language specific version of this keyword we use in the US, and is it right? And sometimes we will then go validate that with some of our SEM data from spend that we use in markets. And then the other really difficult one that we have run into is sometimes in our product, how we refer to our service is different from how we want to target a keyword for SEO. And that has been something that happened during migration, but it's something that we are now like seeing and want to go solve, because we want those really to match. But sometimes the context is slightly different. And so those are some of the nuances that you get into is, what are people searching for? Is this the right translation? And then how do we apply it into our product so it makes sense for international users? And then how do we validate that with a third party?
That might change the actual term might change over time as well as the product becomes more, well known, or as the service becomes more well known. Not even Rover, but that there is such a thing called doggy daycare, and my dog can go and play with his friends at someone else's house during the day. We have to make sure that we're keeping up and doing our keyword research regularly as well.
Yeah, well, actually, that's a great segue into my next question, which is, how often are you making adjustments to your content so that you're competitive in terms of rankings and organic search?
Mark sent me a ticket this morning.
Yeah, we've had a few things happen at Rover. First was the initial, hey, we've acquired Dog Buddy and we want to go into these markets and create Rover pages on rover.com using our own technology to go into these markets. A couple of things there, though. We didn't expand fully into all markets in Europe with all of our services. So in the UK, we expanded with all 5 of our core services that we have in the US, but in every other international market, we started with dog boarding because we wanted to get pages out there and get traction prior to expanding too much, because that could impact the US site, being that we're all on rover.com instead of another concept that we haven't gotten into, but another way you can go and do this is country level domains. So rover.co.uk or a version like that. That adds even more complication in how you go do this. So we've kept it on the .com for now. But competitor analysis is a huge one for us that we try to get back into fairly frequently. And when we see changes in rank, we're able to go for an individual keyword and look at how competitors have shifted. And then we can go into a competitor's website and see what they've actually changed that may have influenced their ability to rank. And that might then make us take a step back and reassess how we've optimized the site and whether there are some opportunities to add new features that might help us to rank higher. So there's
Mark, I've got a question on that, actually. Yeah. I got a question on that. So you are on the digital team, you're helping to shape the SEO strategy and you implement it. clearly you and Jordanna work very closely together. How do you guys talk about this though in internally to ensure that like I'm curious to know like what is the relationship or what should be the relationship between localization teams and digital teams that are trying to make sure that the implementation digitally is competitive.
Yeah. So for Rover, there's two ways that we approach this. One is just through us building code and using the automated features that allow us to take terms that we've pre-decided what their translations are going to be and write them into the code and have them come over to Smartling and get the right translations. That is a process that is fairly seamless because we have already upstream made decisions on what keywords we want to target. Where it becomes a little more complicated is when we want to reassess what that target is. And that involves a process of, I know SEO, but I don't speak all languages that we have pages in. So having partners on Jordanna's team, as well as Jordanna to help us reassess our keyword targets, or for pages that have a lot of content on them, sometimes there's just a function where I go back through or have team members go back through to reassess, hey, do we have a matching title tag, H1? Is there this keyword in the content? And if those are mismatching, we might have a problem in how we initially did that optimization, where we need to go back and re-audit this page. And I think that's the task that Jordanna is referring to that I sent over, is we found one of those. So there's kind of the manual component and the automated component.
And I think it's also important, I mean, we're talking about web right now and our desktop website, but there's a whole other component of this and keyword research when it comes to the mobile apps as well. And, you know, there's a somewhat different strategy that we can maybe do another webinar on at another time, but you know, that's another big part of it. And do you use the same keywords or different ones? So there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's really important that you two have a very strong partnership to ensure that translation for SEO keywords and that you are together monitoring the success of your rankings in foreign markets is essential.
Yeah, I think the glossary also comes in really handy. I've published that on our internal wiki for the team as well. So you don't necessarily need to speak all the languages. If you need to find out what we call dog walking in Swedish, then you have that available to you. So having transparency and visibility as much as possible for anybody that's going to need those resources is really helpful.
Awesome. Well, we've talked a lot about some terms that are sometimes translated in for different markets and sometimes not. One example that we looked at is the term dog sitter. And here this is just a snapshot from your glossary. I've just reorganized it so it looks really good here. I hope so too, because I'm the one who helped put it together. But we have dog sitter is the English term, but it's interesting. In France, the term is dog sitter. However, in Canada, through French, the term would be gardien. I'm definitely not pronouncing that as I should be.
It wasn't bad, actually. That was pretty good.
Good. My French teacher from 8th grade would be proud. But this is a great example of how you have to be very careful when selecting keywords on the regional basis.
Yeah, I mean, if we just went in and with no glossary terms, no keyword research, then we'd probably have a really different list of, for the word dog sitter here, of translations. And I mentioned when we were chatting a couple of weeks ago that sometimes our engineers are freaking out when they get the translations back and they see English that's coming through and they're like, hey, it wasn't translated, something's broken. And we just need to slack them back, say, no, it's all good. It's all good. This is the term that we're using because that's actually what people are searching the most in that specific country or region.
Setting up all of this content in the glossary is essential because once the content gets to the translator in the Smartling cat tool, this is what they see. I've taken a screenshot of the entire cat tool and I've zoomed in to the most relevant part, which is here. This is the source string looking for dog sitter or walker. And you could see that the dog sitter term is underlined in green. And if you hover over it, like I did in this screenshot, you can see that the translation is provided and you can see the definition of the term. And I imagine that you two would have coordinated the correct translation for German for dog sitter at some point in time.
Yeah, there was a big initial push where we were like, okay, what are every, all the important terms and features, and not just, dog sitting and dog walking, but what are the different, programs we have, or what do we call this type of person, or an owner or a pet sitter. So that was kind of an initial rush to get all of that down. And now it's really more of an organic process. So it's always growing as we launch new products and features. But the translation of each of the different services also can change over time. And I think that's important to note, that it doesn't necessarily need to stay the same as long as you're changing it throughout the entire product, but that consistency is important.
When you go to change the term throughout the whole product, are you using the find and replace functionality in Smartling so that you can update all of the translations at the same time, or do you have a different process for doing that?
It depends what we're specifically looking to change. Usually we'll use the global one. You just need to be careful when you're in there that, if you're changing something that's a placeholder, that you're matching the case properly. And, if things are being used in more than one spot, you have to just be mindful as you go through it. Oh. It's time for another donut. But yeah, typically we'll use the find and replace tool, which has been really helpful.
I think he's done. The find and replace tool. This is a great use case for it, but you also threw out some good cautionary wisdom out there. Maybe it's not the exact match for every single use case, because you'll have a placeholder or title, you'll have a case change or something like that. But this is an awesome example of where you can use the global search tool as well, because you probably have, hundreds of strings with the term dog sitter in it, for example. So it'd be pretty painful to go through the code base or to go through and manually adjust these. Whereas in Smartling, you can really just do it in a couple of clicks.
Yeah, it makes it super easy.
These webinars are so much better when Fitz chimes in. It really makes them more colorful. The other aspect that that we discussed as being really valuable to Rover is the ability to translate content with context. And here I've actually zoomed out on a string that includes the dog walkers glossary term. But how do you feel, and do your internal translators feel, about the ability to translate content with visual context?
It's everything. It really, really is everything, because the way that you need to code and have placeholders when you have an internationalized site can often, often have strings come in that will be one word and then 5 different placeholders that you can't edit. So seeing that in context and being able to see what those placeholders are. So is it, a date and time format? So, we'll have a string that might say, Fitz is ready for his booking with Sarah at, this date and time. And without the visual context, the order of the placeholders might need to change in every language. And so you need to have that so that you can have the correct content, the correct translations, and also, have an efficient process that works without having too many bottlenecks of needing to find, and answer a ton of questions with the engineers.
Well, another great segue, because we had spoken a little bit about the value of the Slack integration, and the Slack integration essentially allows you to get notifications within your Slack instance about strings in the Smartling platform that have either a source issue or a translation issue. How are you all using this, and how much does this save? How much time does this save your team?
Yeah, I mean, we have different Slack integrations for different projects in Smartling. So uh, our web and mobile apps will go into a Slack channel with our engineers, whereas I've directed the email project to our CRM managers, so that the issues are going to the right people directly. It doesn't need to be company-wide channel where everything goes into and it's just a lot of noise. Directing the content to the right people right away closes the loop really, really well. So you can do everything. You can comment and resolve it from in there, which is great. And no one, initially we had everyone kind of poking around Smartling and trying to figure things out and pinging me on Slack. But since the integration, it's been really smooth. So I appreciate that.
That's awesome. Well, over the past couple of years, you have really indeed scaled Rover's content for other languages. In fact, you've increased the amount of content you translated year over year by 427%, which is, as you predicted, a need that Rover would have. And I think today's story really helps to show and shed light on how you actually accomplish this. But there are a couple of other pretty outstanding results that I thought we should go through. The first being how many words you translated in the past 2 years with Rover.
Yeah, that's a big number.
It's a pretty significant number, and I think what's cool about that too is when you go to plan, you mentioned earlier, Jordanna, like it's really hard to plan for translation and localization. Sometimes you just don't know how much you're going to translate. But through this entire webinar, you both have alluded to the fact that it's all dynamic. It might be that you have to change your content because you need to be more competitive for search. You might need to change your content because you have a product feature that's come out. You might need to just make an adjustment to the name of the product feature because it doesn't fit in the market that you're translating into. All of this adds up. It's not just blogs or how many words are on your homepage right now, or it's really hard to predict, but the ability to scale your content is absolutely essential. The other thing that you mentioned, Jordanna, is that when you're not using your in-house translators, you flick a switch and all of your the content starts to go to Smartling translators. And we ran a report and it shows that 1% of your content gets changed after Smartling translation, which suggests that the reliability of that content is very high. What sort of peace of mind or value does that bring to you and your organization?
I mean, I think I alluded in the beginning that trust is huge for us as a company. When you're handing over your dog, you're handing over your baby to a sitter, and the language and the words that we use to convey that is the image that that we have. So we're not unfortunately out there every day meeting every single sitter because it's just too big of a company right now. But what we can do is try to convey that through our brand and through our marketing and through the support team that our users connect with. So having a site that's well translated and localized and within our tone of voice and brand is paramount to success in any market we'll go into.
The last result that that Jordanna and Mark, you both achieved with Rover is that the effective cost per word for translation is now just 10 cents. And when we ran the numbers for when you started your term with Smartling, it was around 20 cents per word. So you've really reduced the cost, the effective cost per word significantly by leveraging your translation memory and all of the software automation to enable this scale, which is really an awesome accomplishment. We're at the 12 o'clock or the top of the hour, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I'll say thank you to everybody who attended, but mostly and most importantly to Mark and Jordanna for sharing your expertise today. I've learned so much, and I really appreciate this conversation.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Fantastic. If you guys have any more questions for myself or for Jordanna or Mark, just send us an email. You can send me an email. I'm at agcone@smartling.com, and we'll be happy to follow up with you all. So thanks again, Jordanna and Mark. Thanks everybody
Bye.
for joining.
Have a good day.
Hope you have a great day. Take care.